Good evening to you all, and welcome to the 36th session of the National Mobility Think Tank. And I welcome you. Thank you for taking off the time to join us in this session where we will be discussing priming e-mobility in Uganda for the carbon credit market. And our guest is already in the tank. Redeem time, I will request that we commence as the rest join us. So I'm going to invite Charles Chibalama to lead us in a word of prayer before we proceed.
Thank you, Allan. We thank the Almighty for taking us through the day, though it's a continuing time for us to deliver, to help the country through our works. We thank the Lord for the life, which is an everlasting gift. All of us and deliver. We also thank God for the beautiful people that have created the time to come up for this meeting so that we can share our views, we can learn from the presentations, and we can do the right things to move Uganda forward in order for it to become the best. All we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Charles. Once again, I welcome you to the National Mobility Think Tank, which is organized under the Mobility Bureau of the Science, Technology and Innovation Secretariat at the Office of the President. And as I highlighted, our guest today is already in the tank. And today we are also joined by the Honorable Minister for Science, Technology and Innovation, Honorable Dr. Monica Musenero, whom I'm going to request to officially open this think tank before we can hand over to our guest for today, Mr. Okello. Honorable Minister.
Good evening, everybody. You are welcome to today's think tank. I'd like to welcome everybody and for showing interest and making time to be here. I know we'll be joined along with a number of people. For those of you who have already come, you're welcome. The think tank, as you already know, some of you know, is a space where we think and exchange ideas and bring a wider experience to see how to nurture these new areas in our country. Today you heard about from the President's address about the onboarding of the knowledge economy, which is really science, technology, and innovation. And as we go into some of these areas like e-mobility, we are learning as we go. And so the discussions have been very enriching so far. And I really appreciate the variety of people. We want to thank our presenter today, Allan Okello. We are looking forward to listening to your rich experience, but I'm also looking forward to the discussions, the questions, the different opinions of all the people. From today's presentation by the President, is expecting the economy to jump to be 10 times what Minister of Finance is saying. He says this is not an incremental. It shouldn't be incremental, it should be logarithmic. So as we think through and innovate and understand some of these opportunities, we will pick up those areas where we have hitherto not paid attention. and being able to take advantage. There are certain things that we miss, opportunities that we miss, like this carbon credit market, that we may be missing opportunity to grow our economy, to move forward quicker, because we haven't understood. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion. I want to thank you so much once again and declare the think tank session open. I will come back later to ask questions or seek clarifications or make comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. With that, I will invite Mr. Okello to take us away. I'll stop sharing such that you can share on your end. Over to you, Mr. Okello. You will properly introduce yourself and proceed with your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Allan. Thank you for the opening words, Honorable Minister. And greetings to everyone else that made time to attend. I hope you can all hear me. Testing, testing.
Loud and clear.
Very good. So let me share my screen. I hope we can see this.
Yes,
Can we see my screen?
see the slides. You can, yeah, right. Perfect.
Okay, good. Yeah, so my name is Allan Okello. I call myself a renewable energy business development professional. I've worked in Uganda now for close to maybe 7 years, and I've worked within the travel market, within the solar energy sector, and also within the blue collar labor sector. Currently, my 9 to 5 is with Sawa Energy, which is a renewable energy financing developer. So at Sawa, we pool the financing to be able to give commercial and industrial customers access to solar energy at a cheaper rate than the current umeme tariff, without them having to pay any shilling upfront. And then we sell them the energy that they consume on a monthly basis, basically under an agreement for up to 25 years. And we allow them to save between 30 to 70% of their current energy. And so that's what I do 9 to 5. I currently sit on the board for Zambo as well, e-mobility company. And I have sort of a passion for e-mobility, and that's how we end up here, because we've designed a program or project to harness the opportunity in carbon credit. That is who I am. And I'm happy to be here. Okay, so let's jump right in. I want this to be as interactive as possible. There'll be 2 basic presentations to this under the same agenda, where I will basically explain for everyone and make sure that we all understand what carbon credit is in general and the standard that comes with it. Give you some practical examples to make sure that you understand why it works and what exactly is traded, and then go through the carbon ecosystem and then contextualize it to Uganda, with wrapping up with what we're doing in this project to help Uganda capitalize on this. Okay, so let's take it away. So basically, this whole carbon credit thing comes from something they call a carbon standard. You have many different names for it usually. You hear people calling it registry, a standard, or a certification, but basically what it is, it's a certification. Very similar to, for those of you who know, the ISO certification process for harmonizing the global process for doing business when it comes to health and safety. This is just harmonizing the standard or the process for people to prove and verify that they indeed have saved carbon. So it's a certification. That's all you should think about. There are 2 main types of markets for this. There's the voluntary carbon market, which is what we're going to focus on. It's the biggest one. It's the one that they started with. And then there's, of course, the one that I don't want to call it forced, but it's the mandatory. So you usually enter that market, and you'll understand this as we go, because it's either by policy or by legal requirement for you to enter that market. But so for the voluntary carbon market, there are quite a lot of markets right now globally. Actually, in Africa, you can access pretty much close to 10 of these markets or more. There are new ones coming up each time, and each one has its own sort of different focus point or different focus area. So in general, the carbon standard or the carbon certification focuses on a few different aspects. You'll see some for trees. I'm sure you've heard people are getting carbon credits from tree planting. I'm sure you've heard people are getting carbon credits from working in the renewable energy sector. So clean cooking and solar are pretty established markets already. So those fall under climate and biodiversity as well as there, and now e-mobility is also becoming popular. But just so it's simplified for you, an example of the carbon credit markets, I've put them in here. So there's the Verra carbon standard, which is usually summarized as VCS. Most times you'll see either Verra certified or VCS. There's the gold standard, which is mainly for the American market, but also looks at climate. For trees, there's the natural forest standard, and then there's just a regular forest standard. Then for e-mobility, we actually would be looking at the Verra standard, and you'll see that certain standards also, I can share some additional resources after this on the different standards, but you'll see that, for example, Verra is focused on climate, but not really on biodiversity. So you first have to understand what focus your project or you're looking at before you can even choose which market to enter. But 80% of the globe, more than 80% are registered under Verra for most of the projects that are working. So it's becoming the most popular, or it is now, I think it's close to 90%. As of 2022, is the most popular type of certification or standard for carbon credit. And so I'll give you just a little background on this as well. So how this carbon credit thing even started. So it was in 1989. That's the year I was born as well. So this is a good sign. But basically, there was an American electricity company that had put up a new power plant, and they wanted to offset the emissions that power plant was going to produce. And so they decided to go and plant trees in Guatemala and invested $2 million in this. The goal here was, of course, to offset the emissions, but they also wanted to build their position as an innovative company in the US. And the point here is that they wanted to do it. They did not have to do this. They could have just done their power project and moved on. But what I want us to pick from this is to understand the logic of carbon offset. And I'll use a simple example between a factory in Germany and a waste to energy project in Kenya. And this is, I'll go a bit slow here so that you can also ask questions. So that we make sure we understand this before we move on. So basically, the idea here is that it is much more efficient and much easier to reduce emissions where it is least costly, okay? So for a factory in Germany that is highly efficient, that already has been built to international standards, that has new technology to help it produce what it's manufacturing, they would find that it may cost them $40 per metric ton of carbon, which is for any carbon offsets, they look at the minimum or the unit quantity they look at is a ton of carbon that is offset, right? And so it might cost them $40 to reduce 1 metric ton of carbon. And so whereas if they looked at that money in Kenya, for example, where they have a waste to energy project with inefficient technology and less efficient production processes, it might cost them $10 to reduce the same metric ton of carbon, right? Now, the logic why it works is that we have 1 atmosphere. So even if you produce emissions in China or in the US at a certain quantity, even emissions at the other side, it will equalize. It will eventually, the whole atmosphere will receive that carbon. And so the reverse works as well. If you reduce the emissions in a specific area in the globe, it also will reduce globally because it's 1 atmosphere, okay? So it doesn't really matter where your emissions are produced, it will spread, and it doesn't really matter where the emissions will reduce because it's the same climate benefit or the same climate risk, okay? So basically the best way for any business that wants to offset its carbon is to do so where it's easier and also where it's least costly. So in that example of the factory in Germany versus the factory in Kenya, that German factory would choose, instead of investing in more efficient technology in their factory in Germany, they would go to Kenya and invest in a waste to energy project because their dollar goes a little bit farther in Kenya and reduces the same amount of carbon. I'm going to stop there for any questions first. I hope that is clear. Any questions?
Yes. So how do they determine the value again? I might have missed it.
The value of
what to put in the. I mean, if a factory in Germany is emitting, and it would cost them so much money into newer technology, but they want. So when they transfer that, is that just put on the market and then this project can pick it, or is there a reviewing?
Okay, yeah, I'm getting to that. You're moving quickly.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
yeah, yes, I'm going to get there. So yeah, this is a good question, a good segue into that, and that's where we're going next. So once you understand why offsetting of carbon works, like why it makes sense for someone to take their money and invest it in someone who is a project or someone who says that they're removing carbon from the climate or atmosphere, then we can move to how they value and what exactly is traded, okay? So let's first, before we go to the economy, I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. Okay, so basically, now that you've understood the situation of the factory in Germany and the Kenyan waste to energy project, now what exactly is traded when this factory in Germany goes to Kenya and invests in Kenya, in this project in Kenya, okay? Now, there are 2 terms we need to understand here. There's offsetting of greenhouse gas emissions, which is basically the process of reducing of emissions of CO2 or greenhouse gases, okay? To compensate for the emissions produced somewhere else, okay? I hope that's clear. So this factory in Germany is offsetting of greenhouse gas emissions. So they are reducing, they're paying to reduce their CO2 that is produced in Germany by investing in Kenya. Now, the carbon offset that they're paying for is, or what it's called carbon offset, it's a physical reduction. So it's actually a physical substance. So it's really cannot be traded. What I'm building up to here is to explain what they're actually trading. And so basically, it's that 1 metric ton of CO2 or its equivalent. So once you understand that there are businesses that need to do offsetting, and there are businesses that, and what they're offsetting is the carbon offset. It's basically, it's in units of 1 ton of carbon, okay? So what is traded here is called a carbon credit. It is a tradable certificate, which you get through going through the different certification bodies or certification standards that I explained, where Vera is the one that is 80% of most projects registered under in the world. So it's a carbon credit is a tradable certificate, okay? So, and that certificate is equivalent to 1 carbon offset. So it's equivalent to 1 ton of carbon that is offset, okay? And so the price for this carbon credit varies from carbon standard to standard. So for example, in Vera and these different ones, there's a range depending on what kind of project you're doing. And it's that price is set during the registration and the certification process. The most valuable offsets is actually in mangroves. So because they have the highest, they store the highest value or the highest amount of carbon, okay? And then the different projects that you're doing would be assessed, and then you would understand how valuable the carbon that you're saving through your project would cost. But in general terms, we've seen prices from between 30 cents US dollars to $15 and higher, depending on the type of project, right? But the goal here is the business, the factory in Germany, in the example I gave, has money, real money, and they're generating emissions through their activities. The project in Kenya, the waste to energy project in Kenya, is turning waste into energy. And so that project is saving carbon from the atmosphere. And basically it is generating these carbon credits. Every ton that they save, or that they prove that they've saved from getting into the atmosphere, is equivalent to 1 carbon credit. So over time, they are amassing or accumulating these credits. Every single ton of carbon that they save from going into the environment. And so this German company would then come to Kenya and say, how many carbon credits do you have? Or they'll be actually able to see it on the voluntary carbon market, because once you're certified or your project is certified, then your project details can be seen online and registered under the standard by any company that wants to buy credits. So this German company can see how many credits have been generated by that Kenyan project, and then the value of each credit as well, the price, and can then decide to pay and buy those credits. And then that money goes and is invested in the Kenyan company, and they access that added capital. Okay? Any questions?
I think my question is, you indicated that different places have different rates.
Yeah.
Is there a reason to that? Because I would think if it's if you're reducing on carbon emissions anywhere, since you said same atmosphere, what is the factor behind the variance in the rates from 30 cents to all the way up to $15?
Yeah, and higher actually in some instances. I've seen 90.
And then how do we compare here?
Yeah, so basically, the way the pricing works, so it's different projects. I find like projects is not even the right word to use. Different carbon saving methods. So, for example, the waste to energy project in Kenya, compared to a mangrove or forest, save or reduce emissions at different rates. Okay. So the big trees that in mangrove forests also are the highest carbon saving or carbon storing project in the world. Yeah, they just store much more carbon than any other method we've seen to date. Much more than even just planting a normal rainforest, because the different carbon markets or the different carbon certifications value these differently based on the type of project, okay? Based off of how much carbon or quantity of carbon that can be stored by that methodology. And a good example here is that trees, it's the longevity of which the carbon would be stored is questionable, and also because you can cut down the trees eventually, right? And then as it rots, it releases the carbon back. So, and then the methodology within your project to maintain a long-term storage. For example, if you have a process that every tree you cut down, you plant 3 or 4 more, then this works. Whereas mangrove forests are never cut down. They just grow into the water or in swamps, and they store the carbon underneath the water, and it's just a better ecosystem for carbon capturing compared to even e-mobility and compared to even solar or cook stoves. Some of the examples from the cook stove market would be that it has the most relaxed sort of methodology for verification. They just need a receipt that shows an actual unique person purchased a cook stove, and they've taken it home. That's it. Whereas for solar, you need to prove that GPS location where you install the solar system, as well as prove that it has been working for long enough to store 1 ton of carbon. And if you can't prove that with a remote monitoring tool, then there's no way your project would be certified. There's no way to even assess whether you're actually storing carbon. And so, and then you bring in battery health and all this as well. And so that's why the prices are different for different projects. So it's not based on geographic location, it's based on individual projects type. And so even if you did a mangrove forest in swampland in Uganda, and you did one in China, and then like the carbon credit rate would be set by the certification body for that type of project. And so that's why they're varying prices, because there are so many varying projects that are being done in the world that are capturing carbon or claiming to save carbon.
Maybe my last one is in the diffusion between carbon removal and carbon avoidance, because like the mangrove forests are really absorbing, so they are removing from the atmosphere. But now like an e-mobility project, most likely is a carbon avoidance project. It's an alternative, which is not emitting. So is there a discrimination of these 2 projects in the carbon credit market?
Yeah, there is. So and the distinction or the way it's differentiated comes into the focus area of the different certification. As I had said, they set the different guidelines or the different metrics to which they assess each project. And so, for example, under Vera for climate, both the cook stove and the solar and e-mobility are there. Cook stoves have a very flexible and it's carbon avoidance as well. Solar is also carbon avoidance. But then under Vera, there's also the mangrove one, which is carbon capture. So they're all methods that will be assessed differently, and that's why the price is also different. They would like to prioritize. So I guess the higher value projects would be carbon capture because it captures much longer than avoidance. Because avoidance, I mean, you really have to prove to beyond a certain limit that you indeed have avoided a certain quality or quantity of carbon, but also they will audit and make sure that there's no double counting and stuff like this. So it's, yeah, that's why but it's all within the certification that you choose, where you can see what is prioritized and what is not. I can share some links for that, but it's pretty straightforward in terms of that.
I think you can proceed. In case someone has a burning question or an inquiry along the way, feel free to raise your hand. I will be checking, and I can prompt.
Okay. So basically, in terms of, I can move to the next. I'll first introduce the next slide, then I'll move to it. So basically, how do carbon credits occur, or how do they enter the voluntary carbon market? We had already started going that way. Basically, the first step is to get access, or the first reason most people do it, or most projects are started, and try and registered under the carbon standard or certification, is because they're trying to get additional financing by selling the offset, yeah, or by selling the credits that they are accruing. And so the first step is to get the project verified or validated, yeah? So you look at the different standard, e.g. the Vera standard, the gold standard, the natural rainforest standard. You look at which one best fits your project, and you select. Then you look at the methodology for how much carbon is offset or generated by your project. They will audit to make sure that the project will comply currently, but also in future. Then they will register your project on their database, which basically will show information on your project, the number of credits that or carbon credits you have issued out or sold, but also the number of credits that have been issued by your project or have been saved by your project. So all that information is visible on their database, and basically then you can begin distribution after you have been certified. And that is where you basically sell to the emitters, the people who are emitting the carbon and who want to offset their bad habits, basically. And you can also sell to brokers or aggregators that are there in the market as well. And so even the brokers have a different price because they've aggregated or they have lobbied with an industry or a segment. I don't know, like I'll give you an example, like North American energy producers, right? They've gone lobbied with them and said, we're going to go look for projects for you to invest in. And so they will also add their margin and give a different price to your project. So it depends on if you go direct to the market through an aggregator or even a broker in the market. So those prices vary, and so they also take commissions and stuff. So that's why you also see the different price fluctuations, because even these brokers and stuff affect the price when they over lobby and oversell some of these credits. And so basically that's the general process. And in terms of the carbon market economy, it's not a fixed economy in terms of like different players can come and go, but in general you'll see that the number of standards that are entering this market are quite a lot, yeah, and from left to right. So basically the corporate companies or the general move in industry nowadays is to pledge to net zero for saving the economy. And so there's a pledge usually that they're going to try offset. They conduct emission accounting within internally, and they understand they now then have a number or an idea of how much carbon they're emitting, and then they look and develop a reduction strategy. Okay, so in their reduction strategy, they can either mitigate, right, reduce their carbon footprint directly by adopting renewable energy sources of power, by putting in more energy efficient appliances and equipment, or by offsetting, reducing their carbon footprint indirectly through purchase of carbon offsets or carbon credits. And so when they go into the offset method, they can do a direct procurement. They can purchase these credits directly. They can go through an integrated verifier, which is those brokers and those things, or they can also do an independent method as well, where they just create a rating system for projects, create pathways for them to reach directly to these projects and do that. And so that's and then the projects on this side. So like us in Uganda, for example. So we would be the companies who say we're removing carbon or reducing potential carbon that could have gone into the ecosystem or into the environment. And so you register your project, get it certified. There is a cost involved to getting certification done, because these carbon markets also make their money through that. And it's on average between $100,000 to $200,000, and it will take you basically around 2 to 3 years to get verified and certified, to be visible and accrue credits and start selling. Okay, and so basically that's a very small summary on a very condensed summary on the carbon credit market economy and what exactly everybody is trading and going crazy about. I'm going to stop here for now before I move to what we're proposing we should do, because there are 2 or 3 main things that Uganda does have to do to be able to get ready for this, if we're to do it as an industry. Yeah.
All right, if someone has a burning one from this segment, before we proceed to the next segment, and then what next, what do we do as a nation? Please feel free to so I think what Allan is trying to ensure is that in the next session, we are all on the same page and we have not left anyone behind.
Yes.
So I think it's vital that we are all on the same page. So the verification fee you talked about, is it a one-off or it is recurring?
Yeah, it's a one-off. It's a one-off to get, because you get certified once, and then they just keep auditing you to make sure that beyond the baseline that you say the baseline carbon you had saved, that you are actually still reporting unique carbon credits. You're not selling duplicate credits, and that the credits you had sold before are still being stored. So it's a once-off, and you get into the market, and as long as you're compliant and pass the audits, you keep trading.
So the audits are not at an extra cost per year?
No, currently not yet, because remember, you're paying heavily upfront, and as long as you're compliant, they won't have any additional fees that they will levy against you.
Right. So I see no hand, so you can proceed to the next segment.
Okay. Second. To switch. Okay, so basically, as I'd said, with that as a background, the main output of certification is to make sure
Have you
that
shifted the presentation? Because I think you might need to change your which one you're displaying. Yes.
Yeah, that's true. I've shifted presentations. Apologies. Here we go. Okay, so with what we've covered in mind, I hope it's now clear that the point of the carbon credit standard and the whole market is that they want to make sure that what you've offset is ideally permanent, or there's a method for it to be secured. Two, that it's a precise definition of how much carbon will be emitted without your project. So basically they define a baseline and then they make sure that the carbon credits that you are accruing are unique. And so with that in mind, for EVs and Uganda, it's very important that we're able to prove without doubt that one, we are saving carbon credit with by putting out or avoiding carbon credit by avoiding emissions by switching to electric mobility, and two, that we actually have a unique count of how many vehicles or bikes and batteries are getting into the market and how many are active. Okay. And so if we cannot prove that, then there's no discussion we're having with the carbon credit market. Yeah. And so the opportunity here for us is that according to McKinsey & Company, I'm just going to summarize and I can share this concept note with everyone right after this. We see that by 2035, most markets, or around 80% of the global vehicle sales, are expected to be electric. Now, the goal here with understanding that is that, so what percentage of that is going to come to Africa? Yeah, actually 70% of sub-Saharan Africa's annual vehicle sales and 45% of its population has increased from 25 million vehicles to 58 million. So the rate at which people are buying cars in sub-Saharan Africa is increasing. And if the global trend is to be trusted, then we expect that most of those sales, that trajectory will keep going. More vehicles will keep coming in, but they will just be switching to electric. So basically, they also reported one other thing, which was very interesting, and I want to share this with you, is that EVs are actually more affordable over a lifetime than internal combustion vehicles. And this was based on the Kenyan market study by McKinsey & Company, where they were looking at basically a few things: the total cost of ownership with respect to spending on fuel and depreciation and maintenance, whereas between the internal combustion vehicles that people have right now and the EVs that had entered their market over the last few years. And so they found that the EVs actually are a lot more affordable over a lifetime. There are less moving parts, and you see there's more value for the customers, okay? And so with that in mind, then it begs the question, why can't we then take advantage of more EVs, and actually that will give us exactly how much potential carbon we are offsetting, because the number of cars are increasing. But if the number of internal combustion engine cars that potentially could be sold can be offset by switching to electric vehicles or boda-bodas or buses, then why can't we also participate in the carbon offset market? Right? Now, the challenge with that is that, yes, the science is clear that it will be more affordable, they will be on the roads longer, and we can actually generate the carbon savings, or we can save millions or billions of tons of carbon every year. Then the problem here is that it's two main things. Yeah. Number one, the sector to date is currently building independently. So everyone has their own platform or their own reporting mechanism or their own guidelines or tools to manage and report on these assets. So if I asked the Ugandan government or even the E-Mobility Association, how many bikes are on the road, everyone would you be able to vouch or put your life on the line to say that, yes, this is true? There are 600 bikes on Uganda's roads, or 30 electric vehicles on the roads, and 60 charging stations, right? So there has to be some harmony in the sector so that we can agree even the definition of how long has a bike been on a road to offset how much carbon. So even that baseline, there's some reports here and there, like from Lufthansa, which is there's a gentleman called Tom, who's running a few studies for e-mobility. He works with Get Invest now, but he runs this independently. And he's been doing some baseline studies for how much border borders emit versus how much distance needs to be covered by an electric bike to be able to offset 1 ton of carbon. And we've actually seen that the data says it takes 6 months for one bike to offset 1 ton of carbon. So basically in a year, they're offsetting 2 tons of carbon. And so that rate of offset is much, much slower than we anticipated. But this could be different for vehicles. This could be different for buses. This could be different for different other electric modes of transport. But we just need to establish that baseline first for each of the different modes. Second, we need to agree on the definitions of how long it takes for the carbon credit to accrue across these different value chains in the e-mobility sector. And third, the reporting tool. So how do we report independently and authentically so that we can invite the different standards to come and assess and say, yes, indeed, this one bike that came from here is not the one that we counted last week over there, right? So what unique identifiers can we put together and enable with technology to be able to unanimously and independently say that, yes, indeed, in Uganda, we have 600 bikes. They're all walking. They have all moved X number of kilometers on the roads. And lastly, they are all still functioning, right? Someone is not just taking the reporting. So in order to report location, there are those GPS chips. Someone is not hanging that on their dog's collar and saying, yes, my bike has moved 600 kilometers today, but it's the dog running around his household. So how do we independently report on that? And if we can hit those three as a sector, there is no doubt that this sector can actually get certified and actually start generating those carbon credits. And actually, there's a big push globally right now. Vera has created a process for certifying electric vehicles. And I would love to see Uganda be one of the first countries to be able to get in there. And we're hoping that with this concept note we've put together, we would propose that we have an IoT platform built for the sector that's independent. It's built to benefit everyone else. So it would be a management and reporting tool for every electric vehicle player. So it would have a platform and an application where the mobile application would share the location, number of charge points, waiting time, available technology at each charging station. The mobile application could also do management of the swap stations to make sure that payments and reports for unique battery swaps, bikes, it would be able to report on the motorcycle and vehicle assets that are on the road using GIS to show their battery health, to show the available charge, as well as show the mileage or the distance it has covered. And then last but not least, it would also be used as a fleet management tool. So this is what we're proposing. And if that technology is built, and if that technology is able to uniquely report on these metrics, I don't see a reason why we cannot get everyone certified, because this would be an open source tool for everyone to use, and it would just facilitate this for everyone. The different large players that have already, or the early adopters that have come into the market, they all have their independent management software or tools, but it is not in any way calibrated to even report on the health. It's usually maybe just reporting on the battery temperatures and stuff like this, but we need something a little bit more robust that can easily be customized for different business models, customized for different products. So if they introduce new batteries, new types of charging cables, you're able to easily adapt this across different value chains and be able to use the same tool to report for everyone. And so this is what we're proposing. And we basically propose that the design is tested. We also test the incentive scheme. We pay for the carbon credit verification or the carbon certification process for the platform. So any project that uses the software is then automatically qualified to access the carbon credits as well. And it just becomes a plug and play situation. I beg to stop there. Are there any questions? Happy to take questions now.
Great. Thank you so much, Allan. I see a hand from Mr. Gaurav Anand.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Allan. Good evening, both Allans. Allan, when
Good
you
evening.
say a bike takes 6 months to take 1 ton of carbon, so what is the assumption on how many kilometers bike could have run in 6 months?
How many kilometers has the bike run in 6 months?
Yeah. What is the estimate calculation? Do you have any idea? Or
Yeah, I do. I actually did this calculation earlier. I just need to find it quickly.
Okay, as Allan finds it, if there's any other, please raise your hand, your Zoom hand. So that we give you an opportunity to ask the question.
Yeah, let's get 2 or 3 questions, then I can answer them.
Yes,
and then
Andrew.
second, I have one more.
Oh yes, Gaurav,
to
please
add on
finish.
it. Yeah. And the second one is when we are talking here for a platform for everybody to come together so that there is data sharing and uniformity. But when we talk about players active today, I think the Zembo is the only player and joined by Bodaworks who are into two-wheeler market. And Nissan is who's doing the vehicles. So why it is difficult when the number of players are already very small and limited? Why this need of platform? Like right now it's a very close community and number of players and volume is not that high to get and synchronize the data. So why this need of this platform?
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gaurav. Andrew?
Hi, good evening. Yeah, so firstly, thank you to the organizers for this session and thanks for the insightful presentation on an interesting topic. My name is Andrew Hollander. I work with GIZ in Uganda on carbon market topics. So, Mr. Okello, I believe you said you are in one of your roles a board member with Zembo.
Yes.
So my question is, how long do you think it might be before Zembo or other players in the space here in Uganda could issue carbon credits, and what standard do you think they would use? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Any other hand? One hand, and Mr. Okello can take those on as other people conceptualize their questions. I think, Allan, you can answer those as others think about their questions.
Okay.
There's one in the chat from
Yes.
Rita saying, as is for other carbon offset projects, I am keen to understand what the emission baseline would be for the pilot. So you can take on those, Allan, as the others conceptualize.
Okay, cool. From Mr. Anand first. So yeah, the motorbike calculation. So we're looking at motorbike emits about 50 kilograms. After 4 kilograms, sorry, after 50 kilometers. Okay, it emits on average. This is based on a Bajaj. So 4 kilograms of carbon emitted every 50 kilometers that it rides on fuel. Okay, so now basically we would need to ride 12,500 kilometers to emit 1 ton. This is where it comes from. And so basically over a year, that is one ton. It would take you actually, in a year, you would offset actually 5.84 tons, but it would take you about, actually I was wrong, 62 days to do one ton. Yeah, those 12,500 kilometers would take you 62.5 days. That's based on riding 200 kilometers a day on average for most bodabodas if you're a heavy rider. And so basically in a year, you can only offset 5.8 tons of carbon with a bike. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, this gives an idea like 4 kg per kilometer, but assumption of 200 kilometers every day for Uganda, for Kampala is, I think, on the higher side.
Yeah, and so that's,
yeah,
that's a healthy assumption, but it gives you an idea. And so if we're assuming $15 per ton, basically every year, a bike would basically be able to get around $87 in carbon. But then this is a scale game, so I think thousands or millions of sales over the next 20 or 30 years, and you multiply that through. This is quite a big benefit, and it's additional revenue for any project basically, and it can increase depending on the size of vehicles and also the range, of course. So then the second question, yeah, why build if we have, why build this community project if we have such a small market, is basically what you were saying. And so our goal is actually to build this platform for the global sector, because everyone is still in building phase and no one has yet come out with something that can be used for everyone. I'll give you an example in the solar sector. If you've heard of Douglas Baguma and his company, where they've built a platform for the solar sector that is carbon verified now. So they have the carbon credit standard from one of the smaller carbon traders. It's called Remote. They install a remote monitoring tool on your solar system. It proves that the GPS where it's at independently, and it proves it has been functioning. And so right now, anyone in Uganda can go and access that remote software from them, put it on their solar installation at home and start accruing carbon credits, or even in business or whatever. And so they're doing that actively in Uganda. So why can't we do the same for e-mobility as well? As long as we can get someone verified, then you can access these credits. The main thing here is to make sure you understand which carbon standard will work for you, and we chase that. But for us, to lead into Andrew's questions, Andrew Hollander, which standard would work for e-mobility? It is the Vera standard would work. It looks at climate action, and so they actually have a specific guideline for e-mobility already established. How long would it take a project in Uganda or Zambia, for example, to get a carbon credit, to start accessing carbon credit? We still have a long journey to go. We're still, I know Zambia is building their next bike, so they're still dealing with the product market fit, and a lot of the e-mobility sector, not just in Uganda, but across sub-Saharan Africa and even across the rest of the globe, are still dealing with making sure the bike fits the need and fits the market. They're still dealing with quality issues and battery quality to make sure that these technologies perform to the standard that's needed for the local roads, quality of roads we have, but also to fix enough charging stations for range anxiety. But technically, if a company was able to raise and invest time and money in getting certified, they could start as soon as they pass the certification check, and also as soon as they can uniquely report on every individual bike. I know Zembo has a way to do that already. So do other players in the sector. They have barcodes, but I think the challenge here is how do you justify, just like in the case with remote, the exact GPS location independently. That would be a requirement, as well as confirm that it actually has been functioning for the time you claim it has been functioning and has gone those 62 days to generate the 1 ton every single day functioning. Like, where do we get that data from to confirm that this is happening for them to access the carbon credit? And then for Rita, what the emission baseline would be for the pilot. Yeah, so that we have emission data for Uganda already that is being worked on by a couple of projects, but not specific to e-mobility. I think it's just measuring the general quality of air for health reasons across the country. I know there's some data centers across Kampala already doing this, but we will just have to take some of that data and make sure that we establish the baseline for emissions, the baseline for how many bikes, electric bikes are in the market. Would need a sector-wide approach for this to make sure that there's voluntary reporting of information on how many bikes there are. This is where I think STI would play a good role, or the Ugandan e-mobility association, to make sure that they can vouch for how many bikes there that have been imported versus how many are actually on the road and functioning, and how many people are actually using them. And once we establish that, anything above and beyond that is eligible, basically. Once someone comes to do the verification, or once we coordinate this as a sector.
Awesome. Thank you, Allan, for those responses. There is one more in the chat room from Ivan. Says, thanks a lot for the presentation. Mine is about the IoT tool. You talked about the software application only, and yet the parameters being logged seem to be logged from the car. Isn't there some sort of hardware needed to interface with the car's electronics and broadcast this data to the cloud autonomously? Or your approach assumes the cars will handle that process? Please, if you have a question, you can raise your hand or put in the chat such that we can take on another set. Moses Paul Seranga, what does Vera stand for? I think he wants to also follow up and see if we can get more information. As more questions come, I also have a few, can sneak them in. There is a study that was done, commissioned by UNEP, and it was published in 2015, done jointly with Makerere University, where they were doing a baseline survey on Uganda's national average automotive fuel economy. That's the title of the study. But and in there, they actually they did an assessment of carbon emissions for boda boda, taxi, coaster, and a bus. Can that data be harnessed to provide a baseline to also help us to see what we are mitigating, or we need to do a more updated study, because 2015 is quite some time back. Is there a limitation on how far or how old data needs to be used in this reporting? The other question, with the, and did you say it's a scaling game? Now, do you see our approach for e-mobility coming more from the manufacturer side or from the end use side? Because the end use will make sense with the fleet owner. So if it's taxis and maybe youth of the Taxi Owners Federation has come together, they have a fleet of 1,000 buses, then it would make sense for them to pursue that. But if it's an individual with one bus, one bike, it might not make sense. So would it be best to aggregate through the manufacturer, through the end user, and are there certain limitations depending on who, or it doesn't matter? Because there's also the issue of not counting something twice, because you can count it on the manufacturing side, then someone else brings and says, I have a project using the same device, so you're counting the carbon offsets twice. Now, the other question is on the HEWA IoT tool. Would it be positioning itself like a broker, a middleman? I'm trying to understand the role. Of course, it's helping us aggregate the data and be able to report better, and also be a channel through which we can access. So what kind of role are you seeing that platform playing, and where would it be homed? Would it be at STI? Would it be a separate entity that is handling that? Would it be a PPP with government and maybe the sector? How are you seeing this integrating? Then lastly, sorry, there are a number. But lastly, on the, I see that the technology continues to evolve. So like you're indicating, Zembo is looking at another model of the bike, which is a bit more efficient, gives a bit longer range. They have learned a few things from the previous model. So for every, because it's things are changing a bit rapidly in this technology space, especially for e-mobility. Would that necessitate that there is a study done on each product that is coming out with the auditors, with Vera? How do you see that playing out, given the fast evolution of this technology? Yes, I see John Mary Senyonga also put a question, which can be the last one we take in this round for you to answer as others think through. Says, thanks for the presentation. I would like to know what a waste to energy project can fetch per ton of carbon and how we would be able to get certified. I know this is slightly away from the mobility, but I thought it would be great to ask now. We are currently producing 1,300 tons per month, working towards 3,000 tons per month. Over to you, Allan.
Okay, so many questions. Okay, number one, I think this is from Ivan's question in the chat. Yes, so there is a hardware component. It's unavoidable to have that because there's two options we're looking at. Number one, most electric vehicle manufacturers and the models that are in the markets right now, even the bikes, have the GIS chips already installed in for the battery monitoring software. It comes with the batteries, with the electric batteries. And that information is already reported to a battery monitoring tool that most companies have. It's usually tied to the manufacturer. So our platform will just have to have a sort of a plugin that can communicate with their software. So it would just be an add-on to whatever they're using and pick that data. Option two is go the hardware route as well. And this may be even the better option for unique identification of these batteries as well as vehicles, is to actually install a hardware component on each specific bike, each specific vehicle, that then comes with the software for this. It would make it also easier to update the software for that hardware and make sure that it's compatible. But there would have to be some sort of hardware component, either from the manufacturer or from us, adding it after the product enters the market, to basically measure and monitor and pick that GIS information, pick the battery health information, pick the voltage details and all this, which could, it's a much higher level of effort, but I think the reward for the sector is good either way, but we can come of it at two different angles. But in my opinion, I think the hardware option may be the most beneficial, because we can, without a doubt, make sure that this thing works. Where does Vera come from? It's basically, it's a merger of two words, which is verified and earth, like Terra. So it's verification and Terra joined together, basically. That's where they came up with it. It's just a brand name that they gave it, but it's basically, it's the verified carbon standard is the most common name that they give it, but people shortened it as it became more and more popular to verification and Terra, which makes Vera. Yes. Okay, then Alan's questions. Can we use the 2015 study? Unfortunately not, because each individual project, when they are getting assessed, would have to have a baseline at the time of verification. So we can use that as a background information, as a starting point, but we would have to do a verification for this specific project and run a baseline that identifies how many total assets that are, how many total EV or e-mobility assets are in the market. When we started this, have they been functioning? Are they still functioning? So that they can then see the additional from every player, or from, and that's what they can guarantee can generate credits. Okay, then number two, is it end user side or manufacturing? The easy route to go would be from the manufacturer, but remember that that could, it may be on the input side for the manufacturer and less on the actual carbon credit generating side, because remember, the bike is not running. It's not otherwise, because it would be hard for them to confirm to the different standards that they have without a doubt avoided or stored carbon, right? Because they cannot say that it has moved 50 kilometers in our warehouse every day, for example. And so it would be very hard. So it's it would have to be either end user or distributor, in my opinion. So the actual bike, the company that is selling and managing these assets on a daily basis would be the one I would see. We have a unique approach, which we're still thinking through, of actually generating carbons for the carbon credits for the end user as well, because we've seen that other sectors, it's the distributor or the manufacturer that actually gets the credits or gets the rights to the credits. But we would like to see a trickle down as well to the end user who is actually using this asset on a daily basis. It could be a game changer for border borders if they could even earn a small percentage of this by switching and riding their bike every day, basically. So the IoT tool, yeah, we're trying to position it as an industry agnostic carbon credit verification tool. It would, I wouldn't say it would be a broker, because we would actually want to work directly with the standards bodies as their tool of choice for verifying e-mobility assets. And so it would probably be more of an aggregator than a broker. Yeah. And then how do we see it being organized, or how would this would HELA be integrated? We're open to PPPs, of course, as a private-public partnership, but we would also like to see it still be an independent company, separate and incorporated, so that it can actually work in multiple markets, not just in Uganda. And so that would be the initial push, but it's still very early stage. And once we actually run a pilot, then we would be able to look at what the viability would of this would be, and we're very open to taking best practices from other markets that have done this uniquely. And so we would also have to do that and see what the best way to make sure that this is sustainable would work. And then the last question from John Mary. The waste to energy project. This I don't know off the top of my head, but I think, yeah, if you check, I don't know how I can send everyone. If everyone's on the WhatsApp group, I will send some resources on there on how you can check on the global standards of how many tons per carbon project have accrued or have earned over the last couple, at least the successful ones over the last couple of years, as well as the standards that they're certified under. I'll send a resource for that, and it's very easy to see that. So you'll just choose the segment that you're in, which is waste to energy, and see which projects are similar to yours and how much they've been earning. And you'll be able to see the rate per ton for that. I can send that to you.
Awesome, thank you, Allan. So Allan, you can also share with me these extra tools. I will make sure they are well distributed, because we also have a mailing list to also those who would have missed this session. So I see two hands. I'll call on Anand first, and then the Honorable Minister.
I have 2-3 mixed questions. One, if there is again an hardware or IoT to be installed on the bikes. Now, with the digital number plates coming in picture, won't there be now multiple hardwares? Because already the bikes have their own inbuilt hardware inside, plus this third-party IoT, and third one, the tracker related to the digital number plate. Point one, will this not be an overload on the already loaded or challenging battery life? Second, why you think that a manufacturer or a distributor would be interested to share their trick states to a third party and not go directly for carbon creating thing instead of going as a community?
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Anand.
you.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you so much, Allan, for the explanation. I have been bypassing this topic because it looked very complicated for me, but you've broken it down that I have internalized. One of my questions has been asked, or you have partially answered it. If there is a value chain approach such that there is distribution of the credits along the value chain, right from, because you see how the border industry is in Uganda. For example, there is the manufacturer, and then there is maybe the distributor, or then there is the one who owns the bike, and then there is one who actually rides the bike. So whether there could be a way of making sure that there is distribution of these credits such that everybody gets something. I think you partially answered that. It depends on how you configure the project. Now, my question is, from a political point of view, where are the additional opportunities that are accruing from this? Where would be the potential opportunities apart from just the earning the credit? Where are the things that Ugandans can make, or which we should be looking at, which plug right into this and benefit a little bit more people? Where would be the job opportunities that I can talk about? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Over to you, Mr. Okello. I don't see any other hand or comment in the chat room.
Okay, cool. So I'll start with Anand's question. Yeah, so I mean, the three additional hardwares, I'm not really so concerned about it. These are very low consuming assets, and it wouldn't be a heavy load on the bike, on the battery for these bikes. I mean, these bike batteries, the future actually for these bikes, I see these bike batteries unlocking more household electrification than some of the electrification projects we're doing now, because these are, I mean, they are 48 volts right now, 80 something volt batteries. For the longest time, the household industry and the solar sector has been doing 12 volt batteries, right? And with this, we can see a time when someone has two batteries on his bike. One, he leaves charging at home and it powers the rest of his house. And then the other one, he rides to work or in his vehicle. This is in the very near future, what we can see because of the power that these batteries have. So having 3 or even 5 devices that are taking much less than a modern smartphone in energy, I don't see it as a concern. I think maybe there is some efficiency we would need to work on, and maybe in future, the best approach would be to just plug into whatever software comes with from the manufacturer. That would be easy, and that would just mean that the design of the platform would have to be robust enough to take on any new developments within any other different type of software that is developed for the sector. So I'm not really so concerned. Once we test this a few times, we should be able to figure that out. Then for manufacturers, why wouldn't they go direct and get certified themselves? I mean, there's no problem to do that for them. What I'm saying right now is that none have tried, and a lot of projects that are currently running now in the EEV sector have just been looking at getting product market fit. Carbon credit is still a new sort of, I would call it it's a new destination for the sector, and no one has gotten there yet. So it's still too early to say who will win, but I think this sector-wide approach is the best way to make sure everyone, it's a win-win for everyone to consolidate and make sure that, because the EV sector is very varied. So as a manufacturer, you just want to focus on making sure your tech and quality of manufacturing is good. Why would you take on an additional risk or an additional business model of data reporting, data logging, and all this, which is really what the IoT platform and the hardware is for. And so I think there's more to gain in specializing, and everyone right now is trying to build the best bike build management platform, and then on top of that, now start chasing carbon credits, and on top of that, sell, and on top of that, repair, and on top of that, build a distribution network and maintenance network. So it's it becomes quite cumbersome, and I see that specialization is the way to go with this. Then, but also it's also very hard for a manufacturer to prove. The other 3 points I said about confirming that the asset actually has generated the carbon offset that is required to qualify for a carbon credit, and two, prove that it has gone to a unique end user and has been used, which is much easier for an end user or for a distributor to do. So, and it's been the same in the clean cooking sector and in the solar sector, where we've seen it's the distributors and the solar companies that are accessing the carbon credits, even more so the companies who are keeping the carbon rights for systems they're selling to households. And so, which leads me to Honorable's question. Yeah, with the carbon market becoming more popular, we do see that the value chain approach is unique. It's different for especially the e-mobility sector. We would like the person who is actually deploying the asset or working the asset see the benefits of switching and going green. And I think that's what will improve uptake. And that's what we need to actually, offset more carbon. And so the value here needs to be given to the end user as well as the distributor, I would say. We can even include the manufacturer, but it would be hard, I think, to sell that. But really, the people who are selling and using the assets should be the ones to benefit from this, and I completely agree. And in terms of jobs and in terms of where's the potential, I would say that there's a whole subsector of jobs that can be made from this. Remember that every single one of these assets needs to be maintained over its lifetime. Remember, these assets are not, they don't have moving parts, so the engines don't break down. So there's a whole need for specialized service industry to come with this. They call those green jobs. So there'll be a need for increased grid stability and grid strengthening, because we've seen it already in the developed world, where they're already rationing times when people should be charging their vehicles and times when they shouldn't, because of the pressure it brings to the electricity grid. We've seen reduction. So a lot of people in the Western world move in individual cars, whereas for our market, for Uganda specifically, we see that we have a lot more decentralized modes of traffic. People are using their own cars, but a lot of boda. And I think there's a lot of room in Uganda to move most of this traffic to public transport. So there's a lot of service-oriented jobs for the public transport system, maintenance, repairs, and all this that is not even tied only to the asset itself, but the infrastructure that needs to come with that. So I think there's a lot more jobs that need to come to support this, direct jobs, but also the indirect, and we'll see this as the sector grows, of course. And of course, in the manufacturing of, they call them balance of systems. So the spare parts, inputs, the small items that will be coming with these new technology into the market. I'm talking about removing some manufacturing jobs that can be done here, prototyped and 3D printed. This is another whole sector that can come just to fulfill the parts needs for the sector, because you can import some parts and do some here in Uganda and assemble a bike. The main thing maybe that will take long to be manufactured here may be these high quality and highly efficient batteries, but why can't we do the rest here? And so I see there's room for not only the EV sector, but these other service sectors to grow.
Great. Thank you so much, Allan. I indeed see there is need, even as Honorable was pointing us towards the value chain approach. There will be a need for us to synthesize this a bit more and do some comprehensive value chain mapping for this carbon credit market. Then the market opportunity that as Uganda has, a gap analysis, seeing where we are now and where we need to be to leverage or to harness this opportunity, because there are things on the policy side and regulation. There are things on the understanding the emissions, for example, having baselines. There are aspects on data collection. So understanding where we are now and what gaps are there to get us to where we can actually start utilizing or harnessing this opportunity, and therefore what action plan we need to put in place with the different stakeholders, be it on the government side, be it on the private sector side. What steps we need to take now to move from talking about this and actually acting on it and benefiting thereafter, and what strategies will we employ, especially as we now think of the value chain, how can it benefit? What options can there be? Can we consolidate all this in a fund? There's a bit more thinking and synthesizing we need to do. And I think the Secretariat will champion that. And we can set up a smaller working group that can think through this. And we come with a few proposals that are actionable, which then we can bring back to the think tank to pick more thoughts. And we have something that now we can start moving on towards a goal. That is what I see as an action item, so we don't leave this hanging. It will be important. So as we wrap up, I'm going to invite Geoffrey Mutabazi, who will give us a vote of thanks to Mr. Okello, and then I'll invite the Honorable Minister to close this session of the think tank, because I no longer see any hands, neither am I seeing anything in the chat room. So I assume that all our questions have been addressed. I will send out an email tomorrow with the recording of this session, with also the materials that Allan will send. So in case you have any further questions, Allan's email will be there, as well as his contact information. You can also drop them in the chat room. If you have any other question you would have for him specifically beyond this, or if you want to engage further, please feel free. The Secretariat is also open to have more conversation towards this direction. Because in the chat, I mean, on this tank, I see we have a variety of stakeholders. We have those on the motorcycle side. We have those on the bus side. We have the development partners as well on this call. So we have a variety of stakeholders here. So we are here to coordinate these efforts and to see how we can realize opportunity and harness it. With that, I invite Mr. Mutabazi.
Thank you so much, Allan and Allan Muhomuza, and thank you so much, Allan Okello, for this presentation. The first time you told me about carbon credits, I honestly tried to avoid the discussion, because I always thought about it, like the minister said, as a very complicated subject that, that was very hard to grasp. But through this presentation, I think everyone agrees that it's definitely now much simpler and is much easier. Really, I would like to, on behalf of the whole think tank, thank you for breaking this down and enabling us to understand at a high level what this really means for the industry, and as e-mobility players, how we can also leverage the opportunities that this comes with. Of course, we await to see what would come out of the efforts to measure, track, and verify, and eventually even sell. One thing maybe that Allan might not have mentioned is, what if riders are being paid to ride these motorcycles, electric motorcycles, and this maybe could improve their earnings, buy them some data, give them extra cash in the pocket, or even reduce their payment plans that they already pay for to own their motorcycles or bicycles or cars or buses. So on behalf of the think tank, thank you so much for presenting this, and I look forward to all the results that are to come from all this new knowledge.
Thank you, Geoffrey. I'll now invite the Honorable Minister to give closing remarks and officially close this session.
Well, thank you so much. We should give a big hand clap to our presenter. We really appreciate the clarity that you brought to some of us and breaking this down. And also this sense of direction to make this something possible. I know that there are some people who always say they earn carbon credits, especially those with trees, and but I hadn't really understood how the general principles and how to apply it. So I want to thank you so much for the presentation, for the discussion. I want to thank you all the contributors, and the value of the think tank is really this, that it brings quite a lot of people together, and we enhance our thinking together, our learning together, and we build. And as Allan has said, we will pick the action points where we see that there are actions, and we need to think through this and see how, as the sector that's leading some of this, what more information we need to learn, and maybe what more opportunities we need to harness for the economy. Definitely for us, we will be open to working on this together, and we will appreciate the partnership with all the people and all the key people. You mentioned about potential PPP, potential separate project, those can be discussed. Whichever is best for our economy is what we really support. But whichever way it goes, it needs a home to support it. And STI is available. So I want to thank you, and I want to wish all of you a good evening, and we adjourn the think tank until the next one. Thank you and good night.
Honorable Minister, and a good night to you all. God bless you.
Sante, thank you. Good evening, everyone.